If you have your Bible, get it open to Luke chapter 2. We're gonna read a passage of scripture together in Luke 2. My grandma, my late grandma Johnson, she passed away last year, and she was known for excellence. She was known for lefse. If you don't know what lefse is, it's basically a Norwegian version of tortilla. Anybody know what lefse is? Okay, lefse. I come from the Norwegian. I got a lot of Norwegian in me, and my grandma's very proud. She's 100% Norwegian. She took all the DNA testing just to prove it because people didn't believe her, and she said, "Told ya." And so she's a woman of excellence. She's known for lefse. She's known for loving people so well. The other thing that she was known for is nativity scenes. My grandma, in her home, she had over 100 nativity scenes set up in her house. Some of them were large, and some of them were just the size of my hand, just sitting on a little table. And at Christmas time, they all came out, and most of them went away, and some of them stayed up all year round. In fact, she had, I believe, 340 plus angel figurines set up in her house. And most of those were year round. And you think it would be chaos? It actually was a lot. I'll put it that way. There was a lot going on in my grandma's house, but it was beautiful. It was orchestrated. It was eclectic, eccentric, and it was really beautiful. My grandma was known for nativity scenes. And who are the characters in the nativity scene? We've got the baby in the manger, who is good. It's not a trick question. I know some of you are wondering, is it really Jesus? You got the baby Jesus, and then you have Mary and Joseph always had that staff with a little loop on it to grab the sheep's neck and yank him back. We all know that. And then who else is in the nativity scene? Wise men and? What was that? The shepherd. The wise men and the shepherds. Wow, maybe we should go back over the story again. We have the shepherd, and if you have a really robust nativity scene, then you have a few animals in there as well. And what I want to do today is I want to talk about the rest of the nativity scene. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the scene that we are all too familiar with. So let's read this passage together in Luke chapter 2. We're going to start in verse 8. And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. Say terrified. Terrified actually means mega scared. There's scared, and then there's mega scared. Verse 10, but the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger." Suddenly, a great company of the heavenly host appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace to those on whom his favor rests." Verse 15, when the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord had told us about." So they hurried off. Say, hurried off. Make a note of that, and we're going to come back to that in a little bit. And found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in the manger. When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told them about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them. But Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all things they had heard and seen, which were just as they had been told. You know, I thought about this passage. You know, this is my 49th Christmas. And it's a story I'm very familiar with. I love Christmas. I love giving gifts, and I love receiving gifts. And I have one request. Do not get me anything. I did not say that to elicit any gift. I genuinely love gifts. I love this time of year. Any idea that reduces the gift giving, I'm diabolically opposed to it. Like, give gifts and give a lot of gifts. Stocking stuffers are really fun too. Anybody have stocking stuffers at home? Your stocking? My parents had leggings. They literally had a stocking that was from the hip down. And they always cheated, like, okay, we're not going to do presents this year. We're only going to do stockings. My mom and dad, when my mom was still alive. And so my mom went out and found these huge stockings that are as tall as a leg. And so It was their way of not giving gifts, but just stocking stuff, and all the gifts went in the stocking. So whatever, just give each other gifts. I love this time of year. I love all of this. And what I want to talk about today is the reality of what's taking place. And when I read this story, I ask myself this question: I wonder how long this encounter with the angel and the shepherds, and they came and sang, and then they disappeared. Now, you might laugh at me. I took out a stopwatch this week, and I read this passage, just verse 9. So verse 9 is when they got terrified. How long did it take to become terrified? Less than a second, maybe? Maybe 1 second. So that's 1 second right there. Let's go to verse 10 and 12. It's the announcement. So what I did in my home, I literally read it in the most angelic, manly voice I could muster up, and I timed it. I said it with emotion. I did it 2 or 3 times to see if the time changed. And roughly that took about 18 to 20 seconds to read the announcement. And then verse 14 is the line that the angels sing. Now, when I read that line, it doesn't sound like a line that you'd repeat over and over. It feels a little redundant. So I made the big assumption that the angels sang that one line and that was it. If that is true, we are looking at around 30 seconds this entire encounter took place. Let's give it a minute. If you don't like my math, that's fine. Pick a minute, whatever you want. My point is this: it only took 30 seconds for everything to change. In 30 seconds, the thin line between the unseen dimension and the seen dimension disappeared. In 30 seconds, the shepherd had a neurological overload. And while that's happening, everything is being reframed about the future. In 30 seconds, everything changed. I want to speak to some of us in this room today. All it takes is 30 seconds. Some of you have been waiting for a very long time. Guess what? All it takes is 30 seconds. Look at your neighbor and say, it only takes 30 seconds. Some of you have been waiting your whole life. Some of you have been waiting 2 days. I have news for you. All it takes is 30 seconds. It takes 30 seconds for everything to change. And in 30 seconds, God reframed the entire future by announcing the birth of his son, Jesus. Now, as we read this story, I feel like we need to do a little bit of a groundwork in regard to the author of this book. Now, we know the name of this book is Luke, which is the name of the man who wrote the book, who wrote down the record. What's interesting about this story, Luke is the only gospel that records the story of the shepherds. Matthew, Mark, and John have no record of the shepherds in their Christmas birth of Jesus story. Luke is the only one that mentioned the shepherds, which I find that very interesting. Like, why didn't Matthew record it? Why didn't Mark record it? And why didn't John record it? Out of the most elaborate, eccentric, mystical one, decided to leave the shepherds out of the story. Luke is the only one that actually records the record of the shepherds. Now, any author that writes a book, they write it so you can see it as they see it. So when you read Matthew, make sure you understand that when you're looking at the world and the life of Jesus as Matthew saw it. Same thing with Mark, as Mark saw it. And in Luke's case, he wants you to see the story of the life of Jesus from beginning to the end. And Luke contributed to the book of Acts as well. And so you have an author who wants you to see something that Matthew, Mark, and John not necessarily didn't want you to see. They just didn't record it. So Luke had a unique perspective. He wanted us to understand the story the way that he sees it. Luke, I believe, includes the shepherd in his story because of his unique background and his theological vision that was different than Matthew, Mark, and John. Let's talk about Luke for a minute. Luke was the only out of those 4 gospels, which is also called the synoptic gospels, which means like a mirror. They're all very similar. John's a little bit different, but we all know John was a little bit different. John considered himself the favorite. He was the one that saw things that no one saw. He was a little eccentric. But nonetheless, all 4 gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are called the synoptic gospels. Luke was the only one out of those 4 disciples that was not an ethnic Jew. He was a Gentile. So already he's an outsider in the context of the covenant that had taken place. Luke was highly intelligent. He was a physician. And to be a physician, I propose you have to have compassion and care for people. Luke was also a close companion of the Apostle Paul. So Luke had a unique perspective, and so for him to insert the story of the shepherds, he wants you to see something from an outsider's perspective, not an insider's perspective. Now, we all know when you talk to someone that has an inside perspective, you're going to hear a certain story from their perspective. And we also know when you talk to someone that has an outside perspective, you're going to hear it from an outsider's perspective. And because Luke was an outsider, because he wasn't a part of the Jewish covenant, which was the overarching principle until the death on the cross. Until then, Luke was on the outside following this man named Jesus talking about the Jewish covenant. Imagine what that was like, to be following a guy that promised everything to a specific people group, and Luke still followed him, which I think is amazing. Like, how is this any relevant to me when all we're talking about is a specific people? Because I believe Luke saw bigger than that. He realized this isn't just for this group. This is for all of humanity. So the reason why he put it in the story, he wants to make sure you and I understand this hope in Jesus isn't just for one person. It is for all of humanity. So he said, I want to make sure whoever reads my writings understand that I see the hope is for all of humanity, not just for some humanity. So Luke, as an outsider, puts this perspective. F.F. Bruce, who's one of the greatest theologians, he says this: Luke shows the marks of a cultured Greek concerned with the universal scope of the gospel. Luke felt like the gospel story is for all of humanity, not just for some. Willie James Jennings, who's another very respected theologian scholar, says this: Luke tells the story of God creating a new people by disrupting every stable identity the world depends on: race, place, power, and possession. Amy Jill Levine, who is a Jewish feminist New Testament scholar who was not a Christian and is still very well respected for her perspectives. She's considered one of the leading voices. Even though she doesn't follow Jesus as a Christian, she's one of the leading voices in the world when it comes to studying the life of Luke. And listen to what she says. Luke is the gospel where outsiders are not brought to the margins. They are placed at the center of God's activity. But I want you to understand that God looks at humanity very differently than you and I do. And Luke saw that. And Luke said, I want people to understand that outsiders actually aren't on the outside. They're at the center of what God was doing. So for him to write about shepherds is something that we need to pay attention to and recognize. So every time you and I look at a nativity scene, we're not only looking at the baby in the manger, as that's the centerpiece, we're also understanding the supporting characters and why we admire this story so much, and why year after year after year we talk about the story. Today, I want to take the rest of the nativity scene and focus on the shepherd. So as I'm reading this passage, all these questions, which is not my first time I've read this passage, but this last couple of weeks, there's so many questions emerging. And there's three questions I want to guide you guys through that will actually help to build a framework for what we're going to cover today. The first question I asked is, why would God choose shepherds to be the first witness about the birth of Jesus? Why would he choose shepherds? Now, there's a bunch of semantic, well, Jesus was a shepherd, and Joseph was too, and shepherd was, we have this beautiful picturesque idea, but do you understand that shepherds were considered the lowest of the lowest? In rabbinic texts that actually guided the legal court system in Judaism, in there, it says shepherds cannot be trusted. They are just like gamblers and tax collectors. So in legal text documents, if you're going to have a court case, a shepherd was not allowed into the court case to be a witness on anyone's behalf because they were considered untrustworthy. And God chose them to be the first witness. I don't know about you, but that disrupts a whole lot of different things. He doesn't care about your theology because he has his own. God doesn't care about what value system you have because he has a value system, and Luke saw it. Luke said, wait a second, God chose the shepherds who we are told to not be trusted. They are the outsiders. They were not to be trusted because they would graze their flocks on other people's land. They violated property line, and it didn't bother them. So they said, we can't trust these people. They don't follow the rules. And God said, that's perfect. Those are the ones I'm going to let know Jesus has showed up. So I want to tell you right now, if you feel like an outsider, guess what? God's going to speak to you. And guess what? If you feel like God doesn't speak to outsiders, guess what? Oftentimes he uses them first. Because God's economy is very different than our systems. Okay, I'm not done. We're going to go for a little while here. So just hang with me. So why shepherds? Why them? They're unreliable. They're unclean. They're not the kind of people to get divine revelation. And God said, yeah, they are. In fact, I'm going to reveal to them first before I reveal it to anyone else. You know why Mary treasured these things in her heart? Now, the Holy Spirit spoke to her, and Joseph just went along for the ride. But I can imagine what it was like for Mary to hear these shepherds, the lowest of the lowest, the untrustworthy, the outsiders, the ones that no one really respects, stumble into this animal pen and says, hey, we just were told out in the fields that your baby was here. Imagine what that was like for Mary. Maybe what God was telling me all along is actually true. You know who convinced her or who helped the story, to strengthen the story? Untrustworthy people, unreliable people according to society. But God said, I'm going to use them. By doing this, God is rewriting the rules of who is worthy to receive divine revelation. The second question that I would asking myself this week is, would the shepherds have recognized what God was telling them that night? Would they have been, oh, we know what this means? Would they have recognized it or not recognized it? This is important because whenever you hear an announcement, even like today, we just told you a bunch of announcements. For those of you that studio is your home, you heard those announcements, you have a context for those. Why? Because you've been here, you're connected to what's going on. So when you hear these updates, you're like, yep, I got it, I know that, okay, I'm gonna sign up for that. But if this is your first time here, you hear all these announcements, you're like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what all this information, I don't know where to put all this information. Why? Because you are not in the context where the announcement's being made. So the question we have to ask ourselves, when the announcement was made to the shepherd, did they understand the context? Did they know the backstory? Or was it completely brand new information? This is an important thing to understand, that when the shepherds heard this, did they know what God was actually saying? What I want to propose to you, absolutely 1,000% they knew what was being told to them. These were shepherds in Bethlehem, near the town of David, which is the line that Luke said. This wasn't some random city in the middle of nowhere. This is where the messianic promise was connected to, the town of David in Bethlehem. And Luke said these were shepherds just outside in the field of where the messianic promise is going to take place. It was embedded into their culture. To be a Jew, to be a nation of Israel, it was embedded into your song. The songs you sang were about the promise of a Messiah. The stories you heard and told were about the promise of the Messiah. All of this was so embedded into culture. Everyone was waiting for a Messiah to come and set them free. And the more, as you look at history, Israel is oppressed after generation, their hope in a Messiah didn't diminish, it actually grew. So when the shepherds are in the field doing their job, when they heard these angels make this declaration, you want to know why they hurried off? One thing I've learned, you don't hurry when you don't have faith. You don't hurry. You don't run when you don't expect. You don't actually go somewhere when you expect it to happen. So the reason why the shepherds hurried off is because they have been waiting. My question to you, are you waiting for something? Some of us have so insulated ourselves from hope and expectation because we don't want to be let down again. So we hope our goal in life is to go through life with no challenges. Problem is, you won't actually step into the promises that God has for you. So hope and expectation is actually a part of your DNA. You are designed to hope. You're designed to have faith. You're designed to expect. You don't hurry when you don't have faith. You don't hurry when you don't expect. You don't hurry when you don't hope. I'm going to keep going. You only hurry when you think God's going to show up. So there's a reason why they hurried, because they've been waiting for generation after generation. So my question to you, what are you waiting for? Or have you numbed yourself to the point because you don't want to experience hardship? You don't want to experience the valley or multiple valleys. You only want to live on the mountaintop. What are you waiting for? You only hurry when you're waiting for something impossible. So when they heard the angels come down and say, he had been born, they ran off because they had been waiting. It was in their stories. It was in their children's stories. Their mom and their dad told them about it. The rabbi told them about it. It's embedded on the wall. It's in the ground. It's in the air. They were waiting for a Messiah. I'm trying. I am trying. Shepherds might not know the doctrine, but they would know that one day God's going to show up. They would know. You see, the Gospels point us to this reality that a Messiah was coming. When you're in proximity to a prophetic reality, when you're in proximity to being aware of a promise that hasn't been fulfilled, you have a responsibility. It's on you to posture yourself, to hurry. When you're aware that the God of the impossible can break through in any given moment in time, it is your responsibility to wait. It is your responsibility to expect. Oftentimes people think, God is so boring. No, you're boring. You have diminished the reality of following God to your level of faith and expectation and to your life experience. We're talking about a God that is still busy creating universes and galaxies and solar systems. He's having a party out there. He is painting the space with any cool idea that comes across his imagination. And we say he's boring? We say he's doing nothing? No, he is busy and he is doing so much. But it requires the posture of the heart to expect, to hope, and to wait. So they hurried and found Mary and Joseph and the baby. Let's not be people that are aware of what God's going to do and are not moved by it. Let's not be the people that's like, oh yeah, that's cool. No, we hurry. We get there. We run to where he is. Imagine being the one shepherd that didn't go. I don't know if that happened, but let's just propose it just for the sake of fun. Hey, you guys go ahead, just take some pictures and post it and I'll follow the story later. Imagine being that guy. I think oftentimes we do that. Yeah, you go. Tell me how it goes. Yeah, let me know how that time goes. Just shoot me some pictures. Maybe FaceTime me. Can you FaceTime me in? You see, sometimes our expectation is so low, we don't have the time to actually find out where God is. We don't have time to figure out where he's moving, what he's doing. We want him to move in our space and not recognize we have to leave our space to go to where he actually is. I know God is omnipresent. I understand that. But there are moments he showed up in spaces. And I don't want to be that guy that says, let me know how it goes. All that is indicative of the posture of my heart. I don't expect. You only hurry. I'm going to keep going on this until, I don't know when, at some point I'll stop. But I want to challenge you. This isn't just a Christmas talk. This is a life talk. You know what my dream is for 2026? I mean, I have a lot of dreams. I have a lot of ideas. I have a lot of things I could ramble on about. But if you were to ask me, what is my dream for studio? One of them is that you would turn up the dial on your hunger for more of God. Two of you. Okay, that's great. Did you know that your hunger for more of God is dependent on no one except yourself? Some of our theology is actually built around someone leads the way. Guess what? You won't get any breakthrough until you follow someone that's actually leading the way. Some of our social Christian frameworks are connected to, is anybody else going? No, I'm not going to go until someone else goes. I have a feeling in this room on Sundays that some of you want to do something just like step out just a little bit, but you won't because the people next to you. Because you're struggling with, well, what will they say? What will they do? What will they think of me? And we spiritualize it. I can feel a lot of you just wanting to break through this barrier, but you don't. You're just sitting there, some days, man, when the room feels good, then I'm going to step, then I'm really going to go for God. 2 years goes by. 3 years goes by. Church, I'm going to tell you something. Your hunger in God is dependent 100% on your decision. Don't let how you experience God be set by your fear of man. Don't let the measure of your walk with God be determined and dictated by the fear of man in your life. Let me put it softer. You care what people think. Don't let your spirituality and your journey with God be determined by that. So if you were to ask me what is the dream for next year, then all you would get crazy hungry for God. That you would all be a little annoying to be around because you're just so hungry for more of God. Man, if I ever get to place, hey, y'all need to chill, tell you what, that's a good day. But we have a long ways to go before I even say that. Don't look at the clock. Some of you did, cheaters. No. Okay, let's keep going. Let's keep going. When you're in proximity to a prophetic reality and divine information, it should shape your expectation, your faith, and your posture. What's fascinating about this story, too, is as you dive into it, you recognize that the challenge wasn't did they expect a Messiah? The challenge was how the Messiah would come. And one thing I've learned when I'm reading the story in my own life, God doesn't really confront my longing, my desire. He confronts my imagination and expectations. Like they all wanted a Messiah to come, but the Messiah they wanted to come was to overthrow the Roman Empire, was to sit on the throne politically in their age, in their culture. And God said, hey, that whole longing for a Messiah, that's beautiful. But what it's going to look like, I'm going to take care of that part. So he will not confront your longings. He won't confront your expectation, but he'll confront how you think it should happen. That's just why when you look back on your life, you go, oh yeah, God totally showed up. I just didn't think it would be that way. Oh my goodness, all the time I was praying, and I actually believed nothing happened. Now I can look and say, oh, God actually honored and answered all those prayers. It was nowhere near how I thought it should happen. So understand that God will not confront your longing, but he'll confront your imagination and your expectations of what it looks like. I'm going to go to the last one. We're running out of time here. The third question that I asked myself this week was this. What did God's choice of shepherd reveal about how he sees humanity? This story isn't just tell us who God is, it tells us how he sees us, how he sees humanity. This is important because when you read these stories, understand you're reading someone recording, but you also understand it's not just revealing who God is. Actually, it's the anthropology side of the gospel. It's the anthropological perspective of like, how is God interacting with human? How does he see humans in the story? And what we see here, God does not see humanity through a social status. He sees us through availability. Why do you think he went to the shepherds? Because they were ready. They were available. They were just sitting there, biding their time, waiting for this promise. And God said, that's who I'm going to show myself to. It's not about your social status. And we have normalized all of our social frameworks now where we all think the person that's going to get visited and encountered by God is this person. We all got this idea. It's someone that has a good family, they've read their Bible every day of their life. We all have our own imaginary, this is who God really likes. And God seemed to juxtapose that framework with the reality of, I'm going to pick the one that no one ever expects. Do you know why Nehemiah was chosen to rebuild the city in the book of Nehemiah? I think it's because of one moment when Nehemiah learned that his city was destroyed, he wept. I'm so convinced the more and more I dive into the story, I don't think if Nehemiah didn't care about the city, we wouldn't have the story of Nehemiah. We would have the story of somebody else. It's because he cared. He was available. So So my encouragement today is God actually is looking not for your social status, not for your economic status, not your cultural ranking system. He's looking, are you available? And I want to use you, but are you available? So is your heart, my challenge to us today, is your heart postured to be available? Or are we just too busy for that? Is our heart postured to be used by God to let the entire past, present, and future know that Jesus has come? So the question is, are we available? This isn't an arrogant posture of heart. It's a heart that's hungry, it's available, it longs for and desires to be in union with God. Something that is burning in my heart for next year, and I'm going to close with some thoughts here, is that you would have a crazy hunger for God. If God announces the gospel to the shepherds, and the gospel is already upside down, it's beautiful, it's surprising, and it's incredibly disruptive. I'm going to read you something. Shepherds were the first evangelists at the coming of Jesus. Women were the first evangelists on the resurrection of Jesus. Let me say that again. Shepherds were the first evangelists at the coming of Jesus. Women were the second evangelists at the resurrection of Jesus. These were two societal classes that were not considered or acknowledged in ancient culture. And God said, that's why I'm going to use them. Church, I need you to get this with me. We have been ranking who should be used by God. And I want to tell you today, God does not care about your social structure of value. He cared about using people that are on the outside and putting them at the center of his story. So whether you feel like you're on the outside or the inside, I just want to make a declaration today. He wants to use you and pull you into the center of his story. Now, how marginalized you feel, how outside you feel, how small you feel, God says, come into the center of my story. I'm going to use you to become a messenger of me. God said, I'm going to use women. I'm going to use women to make sure the world knows that he rose from the dead. And I'm going to use shepherds, the people that no one can trust, to tell them that Jesus has come. So I'm telling you, pay attention to who's talking about Jesus. Not your preference of who should be talking about Jesus. This is the continuation of an upside-down kingdom, and this is precisely what Luke wanted us to see. He wanted to see it from an outside perspective to make it clear to every human, whether you're in the covenant or you feel like you're outside the covenant, God actually chose all of humanity. So why don't you stand with me?